Okay, so a venue says ew to LGBTQ weddings. Now, this article that we have comes to us from Wood TV, but you can find coverage of this anywhere. Basically, a new wedding venue in Michigan would like to remind you once again that you have choices in your bigotry. You don't just have to hate immigrants. You don't just have to hate rape victims or black people. You can still hate queers. So this venue that looks like a refurbished White Castle has a no gay, no trans policy, not because Clarence Thomas needs more reasons to roll back civil rights to the mid 20th century. No. If you thought that, you're way overestimating the intellect of these noble business owners. No, you guessed it. They don't want LGBTQ weddings because their sky wizard said so. Yeah. So I will admit that I am pretty conflicted. So briefly conflicted when this type of discrimination comes up. Like, you don't want to bake me a cake? Fine. I don't want to support an asshole anyway. You don't, I'm actually glad these people put their bigotry on display because, as the article reads, this venue has lost potential vendors, they've lost potential customers, and they're facing a lot of backlash for this position. So that's kind of what I want. I want them to be out there so that we can all shop elsewhere and let their hatred wither on the vine. But then whenever I think of that, it reminds me that if you're allowed to discriminate in the public sphere, it doesn't stop at cakes and fancy landscaping. It results in denied marriage licenses, separate water fountains, girls going to school being pelted by rocks, and people being kicked off train cars because they're 1/8 black. So yeah, it's a pretty big fucking problem. I'm not as conflicted as I always end up. It doesn't take long, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't like it, but it has to be this way. What do you ladies think?
I am right there with you. Like I don't like the idea of legislating how people do business, but I also don't like businesses being allowed to be to discriminate against people, right? Like, so it's a balance that I think has to be said. Having said that, like, so I agree that it's complete discrimination and it's complete bullshit. But I also agree that I like that this is news because as soon as you know that a place is bigoted, racist, whatever the case may be, you are absolutely free not to frequent them. So whether it's a wedding chapel or a choice sandwich shop that specializes in chicken, you can choose once you know what their stance is to not frequent them. And it kind of sucks because I would bet they're still pretty booked up by people who are just like them, right? So they're still getting business. Like they're still doing just fine. But my original thoughts were exactly like Nate's where I'm like, well, at least I know where not to go. Like so there's the silver lining in that shitty story. My first thought when I was reading this was, I don't like these people. Like, I don't like them at all, right? And in one of the woman's quotes, Hannah, one of her quotes was, "We love love," and I was like, "That's right, just not LGBTQ
Do you?
love. Like, you love a version of love. You love a piece of love. You love the L of love, but you forget about the OVE, right? Like, there's a lot of options when it comes to love, and you love this tiny sliver that fits your description of love." And, so I got kind of a little bit caught up on that because I'm not entirely convinced that, that this couple or even people who have an ideology similar to this couple, I'm not really sure they understand what love is, right? If it's that contrived and that narrow-minded, I'm not really sure you understand
Hmm.
what you're saying when you say you love love.
Something that I found interesting about one of the videos that was posted about this situation was that they had made a comment like, "This is what we believe. This is what were raised with," and then they just carried on. Exactly. This is what you were raised with. Have you thought about it more than for 2 seconds? Why do you believe this?
Yeah.
Why is this such a big deal that you're willing to publicly humiliate yourself over your stance? That wasn't one of my main points. My main point here is that uh, Yeah, so my husband and I are business owners. I do have like this, I feel for the fact of a business owner having something causing them issues, but at the same time, you can be a bigot in the privacy of your own mind. But when you commit to having a business publicly, you should not be allowed to perform your bigotry publicly. Personally, that's how I feel. And in the market of free ideas and the free market of capitalism, if you're going to act like a bigot, you're going to suffer for it. And I'm glad, like Nate had said, I'm glad that people are showing up and it's causing a disturbance for them, because maybe it will have a little bit of an effect on their attitude if they're willing to take a look at that reasoning further than this is what we were raised with, because that's a bullshit reason to believe in something. And I mean, furthermore, right now, this is the current issue that we talk about with, business ethics. Like, should we allow people who are of same-sex marriage to come at these to have these services? Like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, how is this any different than having a business and having a sign in your window that says whites only?
It isn't. That's what I was getting at.
Please tell me the
There's no difference.
distinction.
Yeah.
There is no distinction.
difference.
This is just our current issue. And I will fight somebody over that. This is just the current thing, and it's acceptable to be bigoted over it. And I think that as we continue as a culture and we continue to push back on this in such a way that they suffer, maybe even in just small steps as a business to become profitable, this is how we fight back against this bigotry, and we move forward in progressivism. I think that the bills that are out there, again, there's a bit of a breakdown between Canadian and American politics, but I think that anti-discrimination bills that have the language to encompass different kinds of discrimination are important. I think that falling on old interpretations of old language in old bills is not the way to move forward, and that we need to be willing to look at these things and move forward and not hold to this any kind of originalism or any, honestly, even the idea of precedence, I think, can hold a culture back, especially when we are at a time and age where we know more scientifically and ethically and socially. It should be a common thing that we reassess how we are functioning as a society. So I don't know. I'm kind of glad that they got dinged for it.
Yeah,
I mean,
Jefferson
I'm glad
himself said that he wasn't a fan of constant changes to legislation, but that the law should reflect the changing culture of the times.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
Laura,
And
I am curious if you're right. I'm sorry, I'll let you speak here, but I want to do, if we can, like a follow-up story to this, because you're saying, yeah, they'll be just fine because all the bigots will rally behind them, and I don't know. I'm not sure if you're right or not. I think they'll probably
no, I'm
wither
not
and
making.
die,
I'm
but
not making a
I'm
claim
curious.
to what's going to happen with their business.
It'll just
but I
be
do know
interesting
that
to
there are
watch.
some pretty big corporations that are still making plenty of money,
Sure.
despite donating
Sure.
to like large amounts to anti-LGBT initiatives, and what I call anti-human rights initiatives, like across the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not saying this one specific one will make it. They may be a small enough business that, yeah, their bigotry might and hopefully does kind of shoot them in the foot. I want to take this in another direction, though, and I want to turn the scrutiny onto us for just a minute, because now Erin had pointed out, like, hey, it's really good that they put their policy out there and they got a huge amount of negative backlash, and I agree to a point, but Hannah says in the article, and this is the woman of the couple, the woman who owns the article or owns the wedding venue. She says, the hardest part has been the really nasty stuff we've been getting. Death threats, malicious words to our children, attacking personal pages, other family members, friends, right? That, sure. Okay, you can say that. But death threats, Nate. So here's the problem. That reinforces the evil liberal. Yeah, sure. Like us as the other side, we want people to be accepting. We want people to be loving. We want people to not be bigoted. When you're issuing death threats to a person, are you furthering your agenda? Are you making a point that they are in the wrong? No, the only point you're making is that you're in the wrong. You're out of control.
I absolutely agree with you, Laura. I absolutely agree. We need to stand up and make a big fuss about it in exactly the humanistic way that we do it, right? As soon as you cross that line, you're no better. You're absolutely no better than the bigots. Why would you even send a death threat or any kind of anything that would cause threat to the person's personhood? You're absolutely no better than that person. So that is a strict thing that we need to hold ourselves accountable to. As if anybody who is, identifies as a secular humanist, absolutely not. You do better than they do it, and there's power in numbers. You work in a group and you make your statement, and yeah, whatever, you go stand outside their buildings and you act civil, and it takes longer and it's more frustrating, and but that's the right way to do it. As soon as you stoop to that level, you're no better. You're
no better.
absolutely no better.
Yeah.
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 That's wrong.
Death threats too far. Would I throw a Molotov at their White Castle wedding venue? No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't even spray paint the side of their building. But if you're
I
asking
might
me
place
if I
a
feel
voodoo
bad,
doll or something.
if you're asking me if I feel bad when it happens, honestly, no. I wouldn't do it, but I don't feel bad for them.
I'm
That's
not
tough, right?
asking whether or not we feel bad. What I'm asking for is like whether we should hold ourselves accountable as much as we hold others accountable. Like if group A, if it's unacceptable for group A to do this specific behavior, we should as group B hold ourselves just as accountable, right? So if we would say like, hey,
Sure.
death threats to an LGBTQ couple is absolutely unacceptable, not okay. Well, death threats to people who are anti-LGBTQ are just as unacceptable. So that's what I'm getting at. Like,
that's why these
I agree.
positions need to be
I agree.
these positions need to become like achieved through a very like a thoughtful process of looking through these things. You should not be, if you would become a secular humanist based on purely emotional reasons, I don't feel like that's a good reason. You should come to these conclusions because you've looked at this whole thing and you've come to it in a somewhat rational process, so that when you get to this point and you have this position, you can hold it on a very rational reason, and you can argue calmly and rationally for why you hold that position. You don't need to resort to violence because you have taken the time to have a thoughtful process of why you stand in this position and not that one. So I don't know. I condemn violence in these situations. I think that's no better. You're not making any progress when you act like that.
That's true. Another thing that really got me was their response to this backlash when the owners stated, "Well, we allowed trans guests and gay guests. We don't hate that. They're allowed to come on the property." And it's like, well, good for fucking you. Like, yeah, you can show up.
Here's your
But
medal.
our staff
Yeah,
is
and
gonna
we let the
glare at
white
you all
people
night.
walk on the sidewalk. Just not come in
Yeah,
our building.
exactly.
How is that different? How is
We're
it
just gonna
different?
glare at
Yeah.
you all night, and we think you should be tortured forever. Yeah, sign me the fuck up for that.
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous. That's their version of walk back. Baffling.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that it's almost like an apologetics tactic of like, look, I'm really not all that bad. Like I have this religious belief that I'm adhering to, so I'm not going to marry you because see, I wouldn't marry a woman as a Christian, so I'm not going to allow you to marry a woman, but it's only because of my beliefs. But yeah,
It's the
so
same
it's
thing.
kind of like the apologetics, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same as I'm not racist because I have a black friend.
Mm.
Like how is it any
Yeah.
different than that? It's just like that's a weak attempt to try to like, regain favor in the other side. So no, don't accept it. Ask for
No.
more. Ask for better.
And they're complete cowards because they're reluctant to put up an official policy forbidding service to a significant portion of humanity. And no, it's like they won't put it up that, hey, we won't do LGBTQ weddings. But at the same time, they've said that they're not going to refund people who put down deposits. So what they're going to do is they're going to take people's money and then they're going to blindside them when they find out they're not allowed to go there. Like, if you're going to be a douchebag, at least own it, put it on your website, and let people rally behind whatever side they choose. But that just baffled me. Like they're
That's
not
just
even going to
scammy,
make it
right?
official. It's
That's just
so scummy.
Because they could just put like a rainbow flag on the front of their building and no disclaimer, and they could get a whole bunch of deposits and then not return them. Like that's just like the making of a scam right there. So that's horrible.
That's also a dishonest business practice. And so if that's the way that they want to go, they're looking at not only isolating themselves from their potential client base, they're also potentially breaking laws that could get them in trouble, right? Like they could be sued for that kind of stuff. So
You'd
yeah,
think.
yeah. I think I mean I'm pretty sure you can if you're offering a service on under one assumption, and then you allow someone to pay you, and then you change the terms of service after they paid you and refuse to refund them, I'm fairly certain there's legal grounds there to do something about that. I mean, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but that to me is, it goes above and beyond to a dishonest business tactic. Now you're talking about not just being bigoted, but also being running a dishonest business
Right.
and potentially breaking some laws.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
that deserves bad public criticism. If you're gonna run your
Yeah.
business like that, that deserves bad reviews. So, in my
Just
opinion,
don't ask
as a
Brett
business owner,
Kavanaugh what he thinks.
you're right.
So I know we're closing up here in the next couple minutes, and I kind of get this feeling that all of the different articles today kind of touched on sort of an ideological divide that we have going
Right.
on here, right? Like each one of them sort of touched on this um culture war that we're kind of experiencing, and I don't think it's anything new. I think culture wars have been going on throughout history, throughout all cultures. So it's not surprising, but being stuck in the middle of it can be really distressing. Like reading these articles was a bit triggering for me. And I had to take my time, and I've noticed
Yeah.
that more and more often when I read the news in general, even not for nonprofits, but including when I read articles for nonprofits, I have to take some time afterwards to sort of de-stress, come back down, get myself centered, because it really feels like we're in the middle of sort of this really vicious culture war. So having said that, what are your guys' final thoughts on the articles in general, or maybe one specifically? What are your guys' closing thoughts? And quickly, because we only have a
Well, I
couple
know we were
minutes.
going to really quickly talk about the Defensive Marriage Act, or whatever. What was the
Oh
name of it that it was
yeah.
recently passed? We were going to touch on that as just like a bit of good news.
Yeah.
The bill that was
Well,
just
it's gonna be
passed in
covered on
Congress that's going to
nonprofits.
Senate.
Yeah, it's gonna be on nonprofits later, because it was kind of, it
Just
happened
happened
after we'd already
today.
chosen. Yeah, it just happened
Yeah,
today. We'd
like
already chosen our
hours
articles and
ago.
researched them and everything. But yeah, so that's good to throw out to the audience, is to keep your eye out. It's the Respect of Marriage Act, and just keep your guys' eye
Yes.
out over the next couple weeks for more news on that, because
Yeah.
that is something that deserves a lot more of our attention than what it's getting. And yeah, thank you, Nate, for bringing that up, because I had intended to bring it up, but it got kind of lost in the fray of the show. Erin, what's your
It'll be
closing
nice
thought?
to
One or two
talk about
sentences.
something good for once.
Yeah, no kidding.
I agree.
I yes, and I apologize. I felt fired up this whole episode, so I'm sorry if I no, I'm not sorry. I'm just saying that because I'm a Canadian, and so it is what it is. I'm not sorry. It just is what it is. My final thoughts are just please educate yourself on media literacy, understand where biases come in, understand where narratives are being scripted to try to sway you towards one type of propaganda or another. Be aware of what the story is that people are trying to sell you, and educate yourself about the actual facts of what is actually going on, because half of the stuff that's out, especially about these tricky subjects about like abortion, are not nearly as black and white as you think they are. So just give yourself some time to educate yourself about it, and also be patient with others who haven't taken that time yet.
Yeah, absolutely.